Montana Territory, 1879. The wind howled across the empty plains, carrying with it the promise of an early winter. Keenan Ellis pulled his hat lower to shield his eyes from the biting dust as the steam-belching locomotive departed Silvercreek Station. The rhythmic clacking of iron wheels on track faded into the distance, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the creaking of the weathered station sign. At 24, Keenan had already seen enough of the frontier's cruelty to believe one truth above all others: a man rides alone in this world. The harsh Montana wilderness had taken his parents when he was barely 16, and the subsequent years working cattle drives had only reinforced his conviction. Trust was a luxury that got men killed out west. Better to rely on himself, his horse, and his Winchester. No point in staying, he muttered to his chestnut mare as he adjusted her saddle. The monthly train had delivered the supplies he needed for his small ranch 10 miles outside town. Keenan had no other business here. Then he heard it, a muffled sound coming from the far end of the platform. Curiosity and caution warred within him as he approached, hand instinctively resting on his holstered Colt. Behind a stack of abandoned crates sat a young woman, perhaps 19 or 20, her honey-blonde hair escaping from beneath a once fine bonnet. Her blue calico dress, though quality-made, showed the wear of long travel. She clutched a small carpet bag to her chest and seemed to be fighting back tears. "Ma'am," Keenan called softly, removing his hat. "Are you waiting for someone?" When she looked up, her tear-streaked face couldn't hide her natural beauty. High cheekbones, full lips, and the most startling blue eyes he'd ever seen. She quickly wiped her face with a handkerchief and attempted to compose herself. "I was supposed to meet my uncle," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her evident distress. "He wrote that he would meet me here today, but—" She gestured at the empty station. "You're new to these parts," Keenan observed, noting her Eastern accent and city clothes. "What's your uncle's name?" "I know most folks around Silver Creek." "Vernon Zimmer," she replied. "I'm Violet Zimmer." Keenan's stomach dropped. "Miss Zimmer, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Vernon Zimmer passed away 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him quick." Her face went ashen. "That can't be. I received his letter only a month ago. He said he had worked for me at his boarding house." "The boarding house was sold to pay his debts," Keenan explained gently. "I'm sorry, Miss Zimmer. Did you travel all the way from the east?" "Philadelphia," she whispered, the full weight of her situation becoming clear in her eyes. "I have nowhere to go. The train was already miles gone, and the next one wouldn't come for another month." The sun was setting, temperature dropping rapidly, and Silver Creek offered little in the way of proper accommodation for a single woman with no connections. Something stirred in Keenan, an emotion he'd long suppressed. He looked at this woman, alone and abandoned in a harsh land that devoured the unprepared, and made a decision that contradicted everything he believed about frontier survival. "Miss Zimmer," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Keenan Ellis. I have a small ranch outside town. I can't offer much, but until you figure out your next step, I'll be your family now." As Violet Zimmer stared at his outstretched hand, Keenan felt the first crack in the wall he'd built around himself. This simple act of kindness might prove that his long-held belief that the frontier allowed no room for compassion was more fragile than he'd imagined. The journey to Keenan's ranch was tense with unspoken questions. Violet rode behind him on his mare, her small frame pressed against his back as they navigated the darkening trail. At 19 years old, she'd left everything behind in Philadelphia, fleeing a family situation she hadn't yet shared. Now, with each mile, she wondered if she'd made another terrible mistake trusting a stranger in this wild territory. "It's not much," Keenan said as they crested a small hill, revealing a modest cabin and barn nestled against a grove of pines. A small creek wound through the property, catching the last golden rays of sunlight. "But it's solid. Built it myself 2 years ago." The cabin was indeed simple. 2 rooms with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture handcrafted from local pine, and sparse decorations. Despite its simplicity, it was clean and well-maintained. "You'll take the bed," he said, carrying her bag inside. "I'll sleep by the fire." Violet stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Mr. Ellis, I can't impose." "Keenan," he corrected. "And you're not imposing. Tomorrow we'll ride into town, see if Mrs. Holbrook at the general store might have work for you. Or maybe the schoolhouse needs help. That night, after a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Violet sat wrapped in a quilt by the fire, watching as Keenan cleaned his rifle with practiced hands. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. Keenan's hands paused. "When I was 16, my parents' wagon overturned crossing the Yellowstone. I was alone, same as you. Nobody stopped to help." He resumed his methodical cleaning. "Maybe they should have. And you've been alone since then?" "Safer that way," he replied. "Out here, attachments are dangerous. People leave, die, or betray you. The land is the only constant." "That sounds like a lonely way to live," Violet observed quietly. Keenan looked up, meeting her gaze. "Never said it wasn't, Miss Zimmer." Later that night, as Violet lay in his bed staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, she heard Keenan restlessly shifting on his bedroll near the dying embers. Two strangers, both adrift, temporarily moored to the same small island of civilization in a vast wilderness. She wondered which of them was truly more lost. Over the next 2 weeks, an uneasy routine developed. Each morning, Keenan would rise before dawn to tend his small herd of cattle and the 2 horses in his corral. Violet took over the cooking and cleaning of the cabin, determined not to be a burden. Their conversations remained brief, practical exchanges about daily tasks. On her 4th day at the ranch, Keenan returned from checking fence lines to find Violet standing in the yard, his father's old shotgun awkwardly held in her hands. "What are you doing?" he asked, dismounting quickly. "Teaching myself to shoot," she replied. "I've set up cans on that fallen log. I can't be helpless out here." To her surprise, Keenan nodded approvingly. "Your stance is all wrong," he said, approaching her. "May I?" He stood behind her, adjusting her grip, his hands steady as they guided hers. "Breathe out as you pull the trigger," he instructed, his voice close to her ear. The shotgun's blast echoed across the valley, and one of the cans flew off the log. "I did it," Violet exclaimed, turning to face him with an exhilarated smile. For the first time since her arrival, Keenan smiled back, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face, revealing dimples and crinkling the corners of his green eyes. In that moment, Violet saw beyond the hardened cowboy to the young man beneath. That night at supper, the silence between them felt different, comfortable rather than strained. "Where did you learn to cook?" Keenan asked, helping himself to a second portion of the rabbit stew she'd prepared. "My mother taught me," Violet replied, "before she passed away when I was 14. "I'm sorry," he said. "Was that why you came west? After your mother?" Violet set down her fork, considering how much to reveal. "No. I came west because my stepfather arranged a marriage for me to a man 40 years my senior. A business associate of his." She stared into her bowl. "When I refused, he said I would either marry or be sent to an asylum for feminine hysteria." Keenan's knuckles whitened around his spoon. "So you ran." "My uncle's letter came at the perfect time," she confirmed. "I took what money my mother had left me and left that night." "Brave thing to do," Keenan said quietly. Violet looked up, surprised by the admiration in his voice. "Not brave. Desperate. Out here, they're often the same thing." The next morning, Keenan announced he needed to ride to a neighboring ranch to help with a difficult calving. "I'll be back by nightfall," he assured her. "Keep the shotgun close." Alone for the first time since her arrival, Violet explored the cabin more thoroughly. In a trunk at the foot of the bed, she found a small collection of books, a tarnished pocket watch, and a daguerreotype of a handsome couple standing proudly before a wagon. Keenan's parents, she presumed. Behind a loose board near the fireplace, she discovered a small leather pouch containing gold coins and a carefully folded deed to the property. Keenan Ellis was a man with secrets and preparations of his own. When he returned that evening, covered in mud but satisfied with the successful birth of twin calves, Violet had prepared a special supper and heated water for him to wash. "You didn't need to go to such trouble," he said, but his eyes conveyed gratitude. "It's not trouble," she replied. "It's thank you for everything." That night, as a storm rolled across the plains, lightning illuminated the cabin in brief, brilliant flashes. Thunder crashed overhead, and Violet found herself unable to sleep. Wrapping herself in a quilt, she made her way to the main room, where Keenan sat by the fire. "Storms like this make the cattle nervous," he explained. "I'm keeping watch in case they spook." Violet settled beside him on the rough wooden floor. "When I was little, my mother would tell me stories during storms to distract me from the thunder. What kind of stories? Fairy tales mostly. Knights and princesses, dragons and heroes. Keenan poked at the fire. Not many fairy tales out here. Just people trying to survive. Isn't that what all stories are about, really? Violet asked. Survival. They talked through the night, the storm raging around them. Keenan spoke of cattle drives and frontier justice, while Violet shared stories of Philadelphia society and her dreams of becoming a teacher. By dawn, when the storm had passed, something fundamental had shifted between them. As Keenan rose to check on his herd, he paused at the door. I'm glad the train was gone when I found you, he admitted before stepping out into the rain-washed morning. The following Saturday, they rode into Silvercreek together for supplies. Violet noticed how people stared and whispered as they made their way down the muddy main street. Ignore them, Keenan muttered as they tied their horses outside the general store. Small towns run on gossip. Inside, Mrs. Holbrook greeted them with poorly concealed curiosity. Mr. Ellis, not often we see you twice in a month. And with company, no less. Miss Zimmer needs some items, Keenan replied curtly. Vernon Zimmer's niece, he added, seeing recognition dawn on the older woman's face. Vernon's niece. My dear, I'm so sorry about your uncle. Terrible timing. Mrs. Holbrook cast a speculative glance between them. And you're staying at the Ellis Ranch. Before Violet could respond, a booming voice interrupted from the doorway. Well now, if it isn't the lone wolf himself, finally taking a mate. Keenan's posture stiffened as a large man with a sheriff's badge sauntered into the store. Sheriff Dawson was a barrel-chested man in his 40s with a reputation for being fair but unbending. Miss Zimmer is a guest, Keenan clarified, his tone cool. Her uncle passed before she arrived. The sheriff removed his hat, revealing thinning gray hair. My condolences, miss. Vernon was a decent man. He studied her face carefully. You intending to stay in these parts? I haven't decided, Violet answered truthfully. I'm considering my options. Options are scarce for unattached ladies in the territory, the sheriff observed. Unless you've got skills we need or family connections. Miss Zimmer is educated, Keenan interjected. She could teach. Mrs. Holbrook perked up. We lost our schoolteacher last spring. The children have been running wild since. The town council meets Tuesday next, Sheriff Dawson said. You should come present yourself, Miss Zimmer. Though, he added with a pointed look at Keenan, your current living arrangement might raise questions about suitability. After completing their purchases in uncomfortable silence, Keenan and Violet stepped back onto the boardwalk. A group of men lounging outside the saloon across the street called out, Hey Ellis, when's the wedding? Or are you just sampling the goods first? Keenan's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but Violet placed her hand on his arm. They're not worth it, she whispered. The ride home was tense, Keenan's jaw set in a hard line. When they finally reached the ranch, he helped her down from the horse with formal politeness. I'll sleep in the barn tonight, he announced. It's clear your reputation is suffering. Keenan, I thought I was helping you, he continued, anger and regret mingling in his voice. Instead, I've made things worse. The sheriff's right. This arrangement isn't proper. I don't care what they think, Violet insisted. You should, he replied sharply. Reputation is all a woman has out here. Without it, you'll never get that teaching position. That night, with Keenan banished to the barn by his own sense of honor, Violet realized that her heart had betrayed her. Somewhere between the train station and today, she had fallen in love with a man who believed love was the frontier's most dangerous liability. On Tuesday, Violet wore her best dress, freshly pressed and mended, to meet the town council. Keenan rode alongside her, but his eyes remained fixed on the trail ahead. The town hall was filled with curious onlookers when Violet stood before the 5-member council to present her qualifications. I completed my education at the Philadelphia Ladies' Academy, she explained. I've tutored children in reading, arithmetic, and natural philosophy. The questions came rapid fire, testing both her knowledge and her resolve. Finally, Councilman Porter, a stern-faced rancher, addressed the elephant in the room. Miss Zimmer, while your educational background is impressive, we must consider moral character as well. You've been living unchaperoned with Mr. Ellis for nearly 3 weeks now. How do you explain this arrangement? Before Violet could answer, Keenan stood. Miss Zimmer has been a guest in my home, treated with nothing but respect. If her character is in question because of my reputation, then I'll remove that obstacle. I've arranged boarding for her with Widow Hannity starting today. Violet turned to him, shocked. You what? Mrs. Hannity has a spare room. Keenan continued, avoiding Violet's eyes. She's agreed to provide references for Miss Zimmer's character. I'll cover the boarding costs until Miss Zimmer's first wages, should you grant her the position. The council members exchanged looks, clearly impressed by this solution. Very well, Councilman Porter announced. Given these arrangements and your qualifications, Miss Zimmer, we'd like to offer you the teaching position on a trial basis. School begins next Monday. Outside the town hall, Violet confronted Keenan. You had no right to make arrangements without consulting me. It's for the best, he insisted. You'll have respectable work, a proper place to live. Isn't that what you wanted? You don't know what I want, she replied, hurt bleeding into her voice. You never asked. I know that you deserve better than to have your name tarnished by association with mine, Keenan said stiffly. My wagon's loaded with your things. Mrs. Hannity is expecting you. As he helped transfer her meager belongings to the widow's neat cottage on the edge of town, Violet felt the distance between them growing with each item removed from his wagon. Thank you for everything, she said formally when they finished, standing on Mrs. Hannity's porch. Keenan nodded, his expression unreadable beneath his hat brim. Good luck with your students, Miss Zimmer. As his wagon disappeared down the street, Violet realized he had never once asked her to stay. The schoolhouse was a single-room building with rows of rough-hewn benches and desks. 15 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age stared at Violet with expressions varying from curiosity to outright defiance on her first Monday. I'm Miss Zimmer, she announced, writing her name on the slate board. And education is not a luxury, it's survival. Those first weeks tested her resolve daily. The older boys challenged her authority. The younger children required constant attention. Parents questioned her Eastern methods. But gradually, she established order and even began to win respect. Each evening, she would return to Mrs. Hannity's cottage exhausted but fulfilled. The widow was kind but talkative, especially about town gossip. Keenan Ellis came into town yesterday. She mentioned one evening over supper, 6 weeks after Violet had begun teaching. Bought supplies and left without speaking to anyone, as usual. That boy's turned himself into a ghost since his parents died. He's not a boy, Violet corrected automatically. He's 24. Still young to be so alone, Mrs. Hannity observed. His father Jacob was well liked. His mother too. She taught me to make proper biscuits. Such a shame what happened. Keenan said their wagon overturned crossing the Yellowstone. Violet said, curiosity overcoming her determination to forget him. Mrs. Hannity's face darkened. Is that what he told you? Well, I suppose that's easier than the truth. What truth? They were murdered, my dear. Ambushed by road agents on their way back from selling cattle in Helena. Keenan found them 2 days later. He tracked those men for weeks afterward. The widow sighed. When he came back, he was different. Harder. Bought that piece of land and built his cabin. Barely speaks to anyone now. Violet's hands trembled as she set down her teacup. He never told me. He wouldn't, Mrs. Hannity replied. That boy wrapped his grief around himself like armor. Keeps everyone at a distance. That night, Violet lay awake remembering Keenan's words. Out here, attachments are dangerous. People leave, die, or betray you. She understood now that they weren't just philosophical musings. They were hard-learned lessons written in his parents' blood. The next morning brought unexpected news. Sheriff Dawson interrupted her class, hat in hand. Miss Zimmer, I need a word, he said grimly. Privately. Outside, he delivered the shocking information. A man arrived on yesterday's train asking about you. Says he's your stepfather's associate, come to bring you back east. Violet's blood ran cold. Alexander Whitmore? The sheriff nodded. Older gentleman, expensive suit. Claims you're betrothed to him and fled before the wedding. That's not true, Violet insisted, panic rising. I never agreed to marry him. My stepfather was forcing the match. He's got papers, the sheriff continued. Claiming guardianship until marriage. Says you're only 17. I'm 19. Violet protested. You can't believe him. It's not about what I believe, the sheriff replied. It's about legal documentation. Unless you can prove otherwise, his papers trump your word. When? She asked, struggling to think clearly. When is he coming for me? He's at the hotel now. Said he'd call on you this afternoon. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Miss Zimmer. If his papers are legitimate, I have to enforce them. After dismissing her class early, Violet paced her small classroom, desperate for a solution. She had no documentation to prove her age, no legal standing to resist Whitmore's claims. The life she'd begun to build here would be destroyed. In her darkest moment, she realized there was only one person in Silvercreek who had promised to be her family. Keenan was mending fence when he saw the cloud of dust approaching his property. He recognized Violet immediately, her golden hair streaming behind her as she pushed Mrs. Hannity's buggy horse harder than the old animal was accustomed to traveling. "Whoa now," he called, catching the horse's bridle as she pulled up. "What's wrong?" "He's here," Violet gasped, her face pale with fear. "Whitmore, the man my stepfather arranged for me to marry. He's come to take me back." Keenan's expression darkened. "How?" "Claims I'm underage. Says he has guardianship papers." Her voice broke. "The sheriff says if the papers are legitimate, he has to enforce them." "Get inside," Keenan said, helping her down from the buggy. "Tell me everything." Inside the cabin, Violet explained the situation while Keenan listened intently, his jaw tightening with each detail. "He'll come here," she concluded. "It'll be the first place they look when they find me gone." "Let him come," Keenan replied, his voice deadly calm as he checked his rifle. "Keenan, no," Violet protested. "I didn't come here for violence. I came because—" She faltered, then gathered her courage. "Because you said you'd be my family, and family protects each other." Something shifted in Keenan's eyes, a realization dawning. "There's another way," he said slowly. "A legal way to nullify his claim." "How?" "Marry me," he said simply. Violet stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What? As your husband, I'd have legal rights that supersede any guardianship claim." Keenan explained, his tone practical. "We can ride to Judge Peterson's ranch now. Have it done before they track you here." "You want to marry me to solve a legal problem?" Violet asked, hurt creeping into her voice despite her desperate situation. Keenan set his rifle aside and approached her, his expression softening. "I want to marry you because the thought of you leaving makes this place feel emptier than it ever did before you came." He took her hands in his. "I told myself attachments are dangerous out here. But being alone, truly alone, that's the real danger." "Keenan," she whispered, searching his face. "I thought I was protecting you by sending you to town," he continued, the words rushing out as if he'd held them back too long. "But I was protecting myself from the fear of caring for someone who might leave or be taken, like my parents were." He cupped her face gently. "I love you, Violet Zimmer. Marry me because you want to, not because you need to. If you don't, I'll still fight for you. I'll still be your family. That promise holds either way." Tears spilled down Violet's cheeks. "I love you too. Yes, I'll marry you." Their first kiss was brief but filled with promise, interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. "Too late," Keenan muttered, moving to the window. "Sheriff's posse. 5 riders. What do we do now?" Violet asked. Keenan took her hand. "We faced them together." On the porch, they watched as Sheriff Dawson, Alexander Whitmore, and 3 deputies rode into the yard. Whitmore was exactly as Violet remembered, 60 years old with cold eyes and an expression of entitled determination. "There she is," Whitmore announced triumphantly. "Seize her, Sheriff." "Miss Zimmer," the sheriff called. "Please come with us peacefully." "She's not going anywhere," Keenan replied, standing protectively beside her. "This doesn't concern you, Ellis," the sheriff warned. "Actually, it does," Keenan countered. "Miss Zimmer came to me for protection, and I've given my word to provide it." Whitmore dismounted, straightening his expensive coat. "Young man, this woman is my betrothed. She's a minor under my legal guardianship." He produced a document from his breast pocket. "These papers prove it." "Those papers are based on lies," Violet declared. "I'm 19 years old, not 17, and I never agreed to marry you." "Your stepfather signed the agreement," Whitmore replied smoothly. "As your legal guardian, that's all that's required." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Miss Zimmer, unless you can prove otherwise, I have to enforce legal documentation." "What if she has other documentation that supersedes his claim?" Keenan asked. "Such as a marriage certificate," Keenan replied. "We were planning to ride to Judge Peterson's today." Whitmore laughed coldly. "A convenient claim, but clearly false. You're not married yet." "No," Keenan acknowledged. "But we can be. Right here, right now." The sheriff removed his hat, wiping his brow. Ellis, even if I were authorized to perform marriages, which I'm not, it wouldn't change the fact that according to these papers, she's underage and requires guardian consent. Then perhaps you should examine those papers more carefully, Sheriff, came a new voice from the edge of the yard. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Hannity climbing awkwardly down from a farm wagon driven by her son. What are you doing here, Agnes? The sheriff asked. Following this poor girl to provide support, the widow replied, approaching with a determined stride, and bringing evidence. From her handbag, she produced a worn Bible. This belonged to Vernon Zimmer. Look here at the family record page. The sheriff took the Bible, examining the handwritten entries. It lists Violet Zimmer, born May 12, 1860, to Catherine and Joseph Zimmer. Making her 19, as she claimed, Mrs. Hannity said triumphantly. Whitmore stepped forward. A convenient forgery. That proves nothing. Perhaps not alone, Mrs. Hannity agreed. But I also have this. She handed the sheriff an envelope. A letter from Catherine Zimmer to her brother Vernon, dated 1860, announcing the birth of her daughter Violet. I found it among Vernon's effects when helping settle his estate. The sheriff examined the letter, its postmark, and the faded ink. This appears genuine. Whitmore's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. I've traveled 2,000 miles based on legal documents. Forged documents, Keenan interjected. Which is a federal offense, Mr. Whitmore. The atmosphere shifted as the deputies exchanged glances. Whitmore sensed his position weakening. Even if she is of age, he blustered, she's still promised to me. Her stepfather and I have a business arrangement. Which doesn't involve me, Violet declared, finding newfound strength in Keenan's steady presence beside her. I'm of legal age and free to choose my own path. And I choose to stay here. The sheriff handed the Bible and letter back to Mrs. Hannity. Mr. Whitmore, it appears your claim is built on falsified information. I can't enforce it. This is outrageous. Whitmore sputtered. You'll regret this, girl. Your stepfather will cut you off without a penny. He already did, Violet replied calmly. I have everything I need right here. After the angry Easterner and the relieved sheriff departed, Mrs. Hannity embraced Violet. Vernon would be proud of you, standing your ground like that. Thank you for coming, Violet said. How did you know? When I found you gone and heard about that man's claims, I remembered the Bible among Vernon's things. The widow smiled knowingly. Besides, a woman knows when two young people belong together. After Mrs. Hannity departed, promising discretion about their almost wedding ruse, Violet and Keenan stood alone on the porch as the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains. Did you mean it? Violet asked quietly. About wanting to marry me? Keenan turned to her, all pretense gone. Every word. But not like this, not rushed because of some threat. He took her hands in his. When I marry you, I want it to be because we're choosing each other, not because we're forced by circumstance. When, Violet repeated, a smile growing. Not if. When, he confirmed. If you'll have me, I'll have you, she whispered, stepping into his embrace. Family, remember? As they kissed, the Montana sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, casting long shadows across the land that had once felt so empty to them both. Spring came to the Montana territory with a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. The schoolhouse bustled with activity as Violet prepared her students for their year-end examinations. Her position had become permanent, the town council impressed by the improvements in both attendance and achievement. She still lived at Mrs. Hannity's, though much of her free time was spent at Keenan's ranch. Their courtship had progressed properly under the watchful but approving eyes of Silvercreek's residents. Keenan made weekly trips to town, no longer the silent, solitary figure he'd once been. On the last day of school, Violet dismissed her students early, smiling as they ran whooping into the May sunshine, proud of their accomplishments. As she gathered her books and papers, she heard the now familiar sound of Keenan's wagon outside. Ready for our picnic, Miss Zimmer? He asked, helping her into the wagon with a warm smile that still made her heart race. They rode to their favorite spot by the creek that ran through his property. The water burbled peacefully as they spread a blanket beneath a cottonwood tree. Spring had transformed Keenan's land. New calves dotted the pasture, and the vegetable garden they'd planted together showed promising green shoots. After they'd eaten, Keenan seemed uncharacteristically nervous, fidgeting with his hat. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the future." "Oh," Violet encouraged, sensing something important coming. "The cabin's too small," he continued. "I've drawn up plans to expand it. Another bedroom, a proper kitchen, maybe even a small library." "That sounds wonderful," she replied, confused by his intensity. "I thought we could start building after the wedding," he added, reaching into his pocket. "If you still want there to be a wedding." He produced a simple gold band. "I had this made from gold I panned myself that first year after my parents died. Kept it hidden away, never thinking I'd have a use for it." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Violet Zimmer, will you marry me? Not because you need protection or because I'm afraid of being alone, but because I love you and want to build a life with you." "Yes," she answered without hesitation, tears of joy springing to her eyes. 1,000 times yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she added, "But on one condition." "Name it." "We keep the promise you made me at the train station," Violet said softly. "We'll always be each other's family." "That's the easiest promise I've ever kept," Keenan replied, gathering her into his arms. The wedding took place on a perfect June day, with the entire town of Silvercreek in attendance. The small church overflowed with well-wishers as Violet walked down the aisle in a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Hannity had helped her make. Keenan waited at the altar, clean-shaven and handsome in a new suit, his eyes never leaving hers as she approached. When he took her hand, she felt the slight tremble in his fingers that betrayed his emotion. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." As they exchanged their vows, Violet thought of the journey that had brought them to this moment, from an abandoned young woman at a train station to a bride surrounded by a community she now called her own. "I, Keenan Jacob Ellis, take thee, Violet Catherine Zimmer, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When Violet repeated the vows, she added her own silent promise to heal the wounds of the past and build a future where neither of them would ever be alone again. "By the power vested in me," the minister concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Keenan's kiss was tender yet passionate, a sealed promise before the gathered witnesses. When they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, the applause was thunderous. Later, as they danced beneath lantern light at their reception, Keenan pulled her close. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. "Completely," she assured him. "And you?" "I never thought I'd find joy again after losing my parents," he admitted. "You proved me wrong about so many things." "Such as, that the frontier is too harsh for love," he replied. "That attachments are dangerous. That being alone is safer." His arms tightened around her. "You showed me that family isn't just who you're born to. It's also who you choose." As night fell over the celebration, they slipped away to begin their new life together. The expanded cabin welcomed them home, no longer a solitary man's refuge, but a family home with space to grow and dreams to fulfill. That night, as Violet lay in her husband's arms, she remembered the frightened girl abandoned at Silvercreek Station less than a year ago. How far she had come since hearing those words that had changed everything. "I'll be your family now." Keenan had kept that promise. And in the years that followed, as their ranch prospered, as children came to fill the rooms they kept building, as joy and hardship were weathered together, they discovered the truth that had eluded them both before finding each other. The wild frontier wasn't tamed by fences or buildings, but by love strong enough to create family where once there was only loneliness.